Hello and welcome to this week's Out of Cast, your program completely in English, as it is pretty obvious, to improve your knowledge about cinema. Now today I'm literally on my own. No one is here. This is Helga the Bluehead, and today we'll get a bit serious, just a little bit, talking about movies about World War I and introducing some of them to you. Also, don't forget to follow us on our socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also just in case you haven't recognized the new app TuneIn, you can also listen to us on TuneIn Radio. Now, talking about movies about World War I, we have to first talk about the genre, which is war films. Pretty obvious. This sort of movies is mostly concerned with warfare, any types of battle, naval, air, land, also including many combat scenes, and of course a bit of drama. Now, it is strongly associated with 20th century, showcasing and exploring survival, escape, camaraderie between the soldiers, sacrifice, the futility and inhumanity of battle, the effects of war on society, and also moral and human issues raised by war. The most popular subject, of course, being the Second World War. The stories told may be fictional, historical drama, or biographical. Nations such as China, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia have their own traditions of war film centered on their own revolutionary wars, but they are included in many other forms such as action and historical drama to wartime romance. Now, there are also sub-genres, of course, such as anti-war comedy, animated propaganda, and documentary. The famous director Sam Fuller defined the genre by saying that a war film's objective, no matter how personal or emotional, is to make a viewer feel war. Now, some interesting facts for you. William A. Wellman's the movie Wings, coming out in 1927 about the First World War, was the first film in any genre and the only silent film to win an Oscar for Best Picture. Later films of varied genres that deal with the First World War include David Lean's colossal epic, both war film and biopic, Lawrence of Arabia, coming out in 1962, was also shot in exciting 70mm Technicolor, and it also is described by Steven Spielberg as maybe the greatest screenplay ever written for the motion picture medium. Also, Richard Attenborough's satirical anti-war musical comedy based on Joan Littlewood's play of the same name, Oh, What a Lovely War, coming out in 1969. And also we can point it out here, Spielberg's own war drama, War Horse, coming out in 2011. So just as I was speaking about this brilliant movie, I'm gonna explain it a lot more, which I'm gonna get into Lawrence of Arabia, coming out in 1962. It is based on autobiography by T. Lawrence himself. Robert Bolt's screenplay faithfully follows the epic tale of an English officer who successfully united and led the Arab tribes during World War I to fight against the Turks. Now, according to many observers, the real T. Lawrence was a very dedicated and sophisticated scholar as much as a brave warrior. Now, the story opens with the death of Lawrence in a motorcycle incident at the age only of 46. The flashbacks to recount his youth, especially when he was sent in Arabia to find Prince Faisal and serve as a liaison between the Arabs and the British Army against the Turks. With the aid of Sheriff Ali, Lawrence rebels against his superiors and strikes on a camel journey across the desert to attack a well-guarded Turkish port. Even if the budget, which was $15 million at that time, was extremely, if not exaggerated at that time, it managed to be a financial success thanks to an incredible box office, which was 17 million worldwide. But again, it was 1962, which was back then a pretty big deal. So, and even don't get us started about the awards that this film has won. I mean, 7 Oscars and 3 Oscar noms for acting and screenplay. Also 6 Golden Globes, 4 BAFTAs, and also Best Society of Cinematographers Award in 1962, 2 David Di Donatello Awards, a Directors Guild Award, 2 National Board Review, and many more, just to name a few. Now, unfortunately, due to its unthinkable feature length of 4 hours, the movie would be eventually cut several times in order to be released in theaters. It would be restored to its original length, which in 1989, which it's the version that is available today, making it finally possible to watch the story as Lynn intended it to be seen. Now, on Rotten Tomatoes, both critics and audience agree that Lawrence of Arabia deserves to be seen and appreciated to the fullest, establishing a very high score of 98%. The critics most of all defined David Lean's project as the epic of all epics, a movie which put the director on the filmmaking pantheon with nearly 4 hours of grand scope, brilliant performances, and the beautiful cinematography. And also, don't let me start on the editing, which is just breathtaking. Of course, and if all of this didn't convince you to watch the movie, I really don't know what else to say. Ah, sì? Sì, esattamente. Okay, right now we'll get into talking about Red Baron, or as some say, von Richthofen and Brown. I'm sorry about for my pronunciation. This program of ours today, we have a lot of French and German words and names that I'm not sure about the pronunciation of them, so excuse me if I mispronounce anything. Now, on April 21, 1980, the Red Baron of Germany and the Black Sheep of the RAE met in the skies of France. One came for a gentleman's duel, the other to kill. That is what was written on the von Richthofen and Brown poster in 1971. And let me tell you, it pretty sums up the whole story of the movie. Also known as the Red Baron, von Richthofen and Brown is a film directed by Roger Corman, starring John Philip Law playing Manfred von Richthofen, Don Strode portraying Roy Brown, Barry Primus portraying Hermann Göring, and Corinne Redgrave portraying Lano Harker, I think. Although names of real people are heavily used, and the Red Baron has actually no mean to be historically accurate, because there are many inaccuracies, and it is highly dramatized, the events. So it's actually pure fiction. And also John and Joyce Carrington's screenplay is based on pure fiction more than real events. So the film loosely follows the life of Baron von Richthofen, a real historical figure, much better known as the Red Baron, the ace of all aces of World War German aviator squadrons. The whole project may not be a masterpiece or practically notable for its actor's performance, musical score, or the story itself, but the airborne dogfight sequences and special effects are what makes the movie something you will never forget. Just like reviewer Leonard Maltin wrote regarding the movie, aerial work is excellent. It's the groundwork which crashes. But what exactly makes these aerial fight scenes so remarkable that for most critics. That's because the real vintage World War I airplanes were used in production. I mean, unbelievable, right? So it was an artistic decision and also very effective, but the airplanes caused several injuries on set. Also, the Red Baron remained a movie which is pretty okay, but it has 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, I mean, walking on a thin line, let's say. But the audience score is actually 37, so it's not that good, you know. And also, it was a colossal disaster at the box office. It gained only $108,000 out of a budget of $900,000 in its limited distribution, both in USA and Europe. However, we really are not so sure about the infos about the box office numbers, because they seem to be a bit non-existent or incomplete at the best, so we are really not that sure. Maybe there's a good reason behind all of this, maybe not. Now let's talk about Gallipoli, coming out in 1981. It's the story of a group of Australian men who leave their various backgrounds and lives behind and sign up to go to war. Yes, of course, I mean, we're talking about First World War. So to the peninsula of Gallipoli in the Ottoman Empire, which is in the modern day Turkey, where they take part in the Gallipoli campaign. During the course of the movie, the young men slowly lose the innocence about the purpose of war. The climax of the movie occurs on the Anzac battlefield at Gallipoli and depicts the futile attack at the Battle of the Neck on 7th August 1915. It modifies events for dramatic purposes and contains a number of significant historical inaccuracies. Directed by Peter Weir and starring young Mel Gibson, it's almost like other standard war movies, but Mel Gibson's decent performance helped and lifted the movie, and also other performances and his undeniable talent in acting opened his way for more blockbusters movies in Hollywood. Now, even if you have watched lots of war movies, you wouldn't have the same experience with Gallipoli, so don't hesitate to give it a try. Also, it has got an astonishing and touching score done by Brian May, who had also scored the original Mad Max that came in 1979 and Mad Max 2, which totally matches the fighting scenes. However, the most striking feature of the soundtrack was the use of excerpts from Oxygen by French electronic music pioneer Jean-Michel Jarre during running scenes. Quiet or somber moments at Gallipoli and the closing credits feature the Adagio in G minor. The film also features the Pearl Fishers duet by Georges Bizet, playing on Major Barton's gramophone before the final attack, drawing a parallel between the bond shared by the ill-fated soldiers and of the film and, of course, the fisherman in Bizet's opera. Now, the biggest success of this movie is that it was nominated for the Best Foreign Movie in Golden Globes. At the US box office, it grossed over $5 million, and at the Australian box office, about $11.7 million. And it's got an awesome score of 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty spectacular. Alright, let's move on to Joyeux Noël. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Okay. Joyeux Noël, or Merry Christmas, coming out in 2005. This epic war drama film is based on the Christmas truce of December 1914, depicted through the eyes of French, Scottish, and German soldiers. On Christmas Eve, numerous sections of the Western Front called for a truce, where the various frontline soldiers of the conflict peacefully meet each other in no man's land to share a precious pause in the carnage. Now, the film is a fictionalized account of an actual event that took place in December 1914, when Wilhelm German Crown Prince sent the lead singer of the Berlin Imperial Opera Company on a solo visit to the front line, singing by the tenor Walter Kirchhoff to the 120th and 124th Württemberg regiments led French soldiers in their trenches to stand up and applaud. Now, it is directed by Christian Carion. This movie is one of the most emotional and different war movies, which showed us the other side of the war and other aspects of it. Also, we have a selection of international stars like Diane Kruger, Benno Furman, Guillaume Canet, I think, Danny Boone, and Daniel Brühl. Okay, I know Diane Kruger and Daniel Brühl in this movie. Okay, anyways, moving on. Julie Noel was nominated for the Best Foreign Movie both for Oscars and Golden Globes. It has got 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. On Tomato Meter, however, the audience score is 89%, and it has grossed over 17 million at the worldwide box office on a 22 million budget, which is quite unfortunate because this movie is just beautiful. Alright, moving on to one of my favorite World War I movies, War Horse, coming out in 2011. The film is directed and co-produced by Steven Spielberg from a screenplay written by Lee Hall and Richard Curtis, based on Michael Moorcock's 1982 novel of the same name and its 2007 play adaptation. The film's ensemble and amazing cast includes Jeremy Irvine in his film acting debut, Emily Watson, David Thewlis, this is hard, okay, Tom Hiddleston, and Benedict Cumberbatch. The story starts off before the First World War, and during it, it tells the journey of Joey, a bay thoroughbred, a horse raised by British teenager Albert, played by Arwen, as he is bought by the British Army, leading him to encounter many soldiers, very young individuals, owners, etc., throughout Europe, all the while experiencing the tragedies of the war happening around him. Now, it's brilliant watching a protagonist that is not human overcomes all the difficulties that faces. The movie also feels like as if it is an homage to all the horses that died during the First World War, which, for your curiosity, is 8 million. Yes, 8 million horses died in this cruel war, unfortunately. The movie showcases masterfully of what horrible things we are capable of. The epic music done by John Williams lifts the atmosphere of the heroic tone of the movie, and of course our hero being Joey. Now, speaking of Joey, our horse, what we see in the movie is actually Joey's point of view of the war as an animal. He actually doesn't take sides. The film doesn't take sides, and maybe kind of that's one of the things that makes this movie so understandable and so full of heart. The film duration is 146 minutes, which feels a bit too long, and sometimes it feels as if there are too many storylines to catch up. But let me tell you, some shots are so cinematically astonishing, beautiful, mesmerizing, breathtaking that it's just very difficult not to fall in love with this movie and not to grasp those moments. On the other hand, there are some shots that seem like they've come out of a classic Hollywood movie, something like Gone with the Wind, and I'm noting here a technical standpoint. But overall, the movie is a must-watch. It became a box office success, grossing more than 177 million at the worldwide box office, and was met with positive reviews. scoring 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. Also, the film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, 2 Golden Globe Awards, and 5 BAFTAs. Alright, right now we are going to talk about my most favorite documentary / movie, and I'm gonna tell you why I call it somehow a movie. Let's talk about They Shall Not Grow Old, coming out in 2018. It's a documentary film directed and produced by Peter Jackson. The film was created using original footage of World War I from the Imperial War Museum's archives, most of it unseen, of course, alongside audio from BBC and IWM interviews of British servicemen who fought in the conflict. Most of the footage has been colorized and transformed with modern production techniques, with the addition of sound effects and voice acting to be more evocative and feel closer to the soldiers' actual experience. It is Jackson's first documentary as director. Now, Jackson, whose grandfather, to whom the film is dedicated, fought in the war, intended for the film to be an immersive experience of, and I'm quoting here, what it was like to be a soldier. Rather than a story or a recount of events, the crew reviewed 600 hours of interviews from 200 veterans and 100 hours of original film footage to make the film. The title was inspired by the line, "They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old," from the 1914 poem For the Fallen by Lawrence Benyon, famous for being used in the Ode of Remembrance. Now, all the footage and interviews were edited chronically in order, as if you're watching a collective story or memory about this conflict, from when and where it started and when it ended. Not only many unseen footage has been used for this documentary, but also many posters and photos were used as well. Now, 25 minutes in the movie, the colored sequence, which is the huge part of this documentary, begins. And as soon as it started, you'll be amazed what you're watching. We are at a point where technology has come this far. It's not a simple documentary as you'd imagine. It's a great movie with astonishing yet heartbreaking stories about war, about the brutality of war, and how we don't listen to the soldiers when they're back. After all, it seems like that people just don't want to know what really has happened. Now, a heads up if you haven't Googled it by now. In this documentary, you also learn that the phrase "no man's land" that you hear in every movie about World War I is actually real and existed. And let's put it this way, that if you were there, it was a nightmare. You either died there or you get wounded. Now, with all of this said and noted, there's just nothing negative about this movie or documentary, whatever you want to call it. And we hope that by now you are convinced to watch it. Oh, and by the way, it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 126 reviews. Alright, we are at the end, and yes, of course there are many movies to talk about the First World War, and we are sure that we haven't covered all of them, but these movies were the ones that we selected to talk about them, and I hope that by now you are convinced to watch them, because they're really some decent and good ones. And of course, we haven't forgot that Wonder Woman that came in 2018 was actually occurred during the First World War, and that was quite important in the plot of the movie. The whole movie was in the First World War, but I think it's a bit much. I mean, it's a superhero movie, so we really couldn't include it here, and it really belongs to DCEU, DC Extended Universe, and that of course, would be for another show. And yes, I am promising you that we'll do a couple of shows on DCU. But for now, we're done talking about the first movies about First World War, and but without any hesitation, we'll continue to talk about some other wars, which, of course, for our next show, we will talk about the Second World War. And I hope that you have enjoyed this week out of cast. I'm Helia the Bluehead, and I was on my own today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, don't forget the app TuneIn, and also the streaming on our website. Again, this has been Helia the Bluehead, and I hope that you'll tune in to our next shows. Thank you and goodbye.